Welcome to Small Towns Unscripted. This is our infamous guest, Dale England. Thanks for coming, Dale.
Thank you.
This is Nicole Turner. This is Tara Kalen. My name's Russ McClellan. Thanks again. Action.
And that's and then now I can ask the question or the statement. I would say you guys have one of the largest family tribes in the valley.
I don't know by numbers, but yeah, there's a lot of them.
I mean, it's a big family tree.
It is.
That's amazing because I'm impressed by that because my family tree is 2.
Yeah. Well,
Don't be so mean to people.
Yeah. We
procreate more.
We were raised on the farm that my mom was born on.
Right.
I love that. Wow. That's how my dad was.
I looked when I found the information that you gave me, and then I looked it up. So your family, kind of started in the beginning. Like your parents came here with their parents. Your great grandparents.
My great grandparents showed up. Grandpa Davis planted some of the first orchards. The Davis tract, which is now where the Manson Fire Department is over there on Wapata Lake Road.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
That orchard,
Okay.
that whole property there used to be referred to as the Davis tract.
That was your Grandpa Davis? Is that your mom's?
That was Mom's grandpa.
So, okay.
Okay, and where did they hail from?
Missouri.
Of course. So many Missouri.
Yeah.
So many.
And that was like around the early 1900s, I would imagine.
Yeah. And, we had, Grandma was here. Grandma and Grandpa were here. Grandma's brother, Early Davis, Uncle Early and Aunt Ella. They
perfect.
live where Sue Crinklaw lives now.
Okay.
They're on Wells. And Beth Baker of the Beth and Luther Baker. Beth was Mom's cousin. And,
Do you see what I'm saying?
That's Arnold Baker's aunt.
Oh. Okay.
We got to get Arnold on.
Flipping it back to the fire.
But it's so there's fingers out there.
Yes.
The Koenigs. Nyla was Mom's sister, and so Jim and Tom and Joe and Kathy are cousins. And
see, these are even the family members I don't know are your family members.
See, and that's why you have to be careful what you say.
In a small town, especially.
It's not just us.
Yeah.
But that's why small towns are. You got to be careful what you say to people, because they're not always 6 degrees away.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, last week Larry was my cousin, so I found that out on the podcast.
Oh.
So that does happen.
That's actually not surprising.
Yeah.
And I'm going to also say what's funny is that just in the few minutes that we've been talking, you've already named 2 street names, and you are the anomaly for a Mansonite, because we always talk about how nobody knows street names.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's always like whose house and whose house. But,
Absolutely.
But you actually do know street names because of your
previous life.
Yes. Right?
You have had a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did a video yesterday. A lot of people don't know this, but you and Lynn were our baseball coaches in the spring of '87.
Yeah. Fun times.
I think Tom had enough of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frank and I and Todd.
Probably.
It was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
We had a good time though. We almost made it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are all fun memories.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. For sure.
And, but 2 of the things I want to throw out before I forget or it gets past.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have been able to do all these things we're going to be talking about if it wasn't for Rayanne, my wife.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Which I was hoping she would be here today to keep you in line, because I know that that's what wives tend to do.
her comment was, "Are you going to talk freely, or do you want to be reined in?" And so I'm here freely.
Oh, I love that. Yay.
So,
That's adorable.
That's
you know,
what we want.
And I love that you just got emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
I love that. I love that so much. That passion, that authenticity is something that I believe is missing in a lot of people, but especially men. You know, we tend to not allow that to happen, and we should allow that more like that.
And the older you get,
Yeah,
the worse it is.
that's what I was just
The
going
better
to
it
say.
gets.
You know?
Because
But-
you,
Oh,
I
he's
would
great.
say, as your role working for the sheriff, you were probably a different man back then, a little bit, than
Oh,
you
yeah.
are right now,
Yeah.
for a multitude of reasons.
You know,
Yeah.
Dale, that's the reason one of the main reasons we started this, that at least from my perspective, and that is because you grew up in a town, then you worked in the town. A lot of times people know of you, they don't know you.
Yeah.
They might know of you when you arrested them. So that's the day that's how they know you.
Right, that's their
That's
Dale
all they know
memory.
about
They're
Dale.
Like, oh, that guy.
arrested me, or you know, or in high school, or something, you know. And we all have, to your point, Tara, we all have multiple levels and multiple lives, I guess.
Yeah.
And so to get to know people in a small community instead of just of them, that's kind of what we're doing this for.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
to quote Shrek, you know, we're just peeling the layers of the onion.
Yeah.
So you were like this big old walla walla, right? With that thick. And then as your decades move on and your lifestyle changes and you add the grandkids, I feel like most grandpas, my own was a tough SOB in his younger days. He had to be. That was the life. Yeah. And then as a grandpa, I mean, he was a softie. I saw my grandpa cry many times in his latter years, and
Well, that's
it
the
was
other part.
like, whoa.
And that's the thing that is also cool about what we're doing, I think, and why people are resonating with it, is that the historical record of the stories from the people to your great grandkids that maybe aren't here yet.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, I wish I could have had my dad sitting there, and I know my grandsons that are 6 and 2 now would have loved to have,
Yeah, oh
Oh, yeah.
for
you know,
sure.
that
Yeah.
information. So that I appreciate you coming, and I think your family does too. And
For sure.
and that's one of the things that, unlike a lot of podcasts, we're not trying to go viral.
Yeah.
we're just trying to create a historical
could.
record. We could.
Yeah.
We could.
It might be viral, but not in a good way.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I think
Not
it's fun.
virus.
I think it's fun to listen to the family members after our guests come on, and then they watch it,
Oh, yeah.
and then they're like, "I didn't know that. I didn't know." Even in your own family.
Or their story, their version is much different.
That does
You know,
happen.
that's not the way it happened.
Yeah, you
You
shouldn't
know.
have arrested me, Dale. I was
And-
innocent.
And that's why I'm here alone.
Just kidding.
Because I don't need someone tapping me on the shoulder saying,
Now.
yeah.
You want to tell the story the way you
That's
want it
right.
told.
Yes, this is how I
and,
remember it.
you know, that's it.
Well, let's
From
go
the
back
mouth.
to your childhood. I want to hear what it was like for you and your two brothers, Doug and Lynn, right?
And Dave.
And Dave.
And my 4 sisters,
4 sisters. You had a huge family.
Judy and Kaylen, and then Mary and Janet.
Wow, I didn't realize you had so many siblings.
Yeah. And
Wow, that's
so, yeah.
So what was it like growing up? And for the people that don't know what it was like growing up here at that time, in your words, what was it like?
Well, we had dial-up phones before Chelan. Chelan still used an operator. But we were on party lines.
Oh, I recall.
So we were on the party line with Clapsteins. So if I wanted to play with Jeff, I'd have to call their number and then hang up, and their phone would ring, and then I'd just kind of wait and then pick up the phone and see if he was there, you know. And so, you know, the communication was a lot different, but it was very rapid at times, because in high school, someone I know may have gotten pulled over by where the current Stop and Rob is there at the casino. By the time he got home, his dad was standing in the driveway
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and wondering what's going on. And
We hear that a lot.
And I'm kind of, how did that happen?
Yeah, smoke signals. What do you guys got? Like,
There's no
Yeah.
cell phones. There's no texting.
No, I
but-
literally always say to people who aren't from a small town and they talk about, oh, Facebook, everyone blah, blah, blah. I'm like, Facebook has nothing on a small town.
Yeah.
We can spread something way faster than the internet, I'm telling
Yeah.
you.
Well, I'm gonna say it anyway.
Do it.
We have a family saying, telephone, telegraph, tell Janet. But at the same time, if we want information,
You go straight to
Janet.
Janet.
And so, she
Works both ways.
it does.
that's awesome.
But she kind of gives us the side eye when we're coming for information.
It's
Like,
your civic duty.
what's
Yeah.
this all about?
Yeah, now you need something.
So let's talk. How many years apart were your siblings? Like,
Well, Judy was about 4 years older than Chelan, and they grew up in Idaho. Dad was a South Idaho boy. He got drafted to World War II, and then toward the end of the war, they had a house fire there in Idaho that killed his wife.
Oh,
And-
my.
I read that where he was hurt severely too, wasn't
No, he was in Europe at the time.
he? Oh, he was over.
He was
was
in
overseas.
either Italy or North Africa. I
Oh,
don't
man,
remember.
That must have been just.
But-
Maybe
horrific.
he was in Morocco with my grandpa.
Maybe. He forged his way in from the army because the war was over. People are going home. Into the Army Air Corps, got on a base, caught plane rides home,
Wow.
and to be with his kids.
Oh, my gosh. That's such a hard time.
So,
He then, his brother-in-law lived in Utah, so his brother-in-law and his wife were taking care of the girls, and Dad was running a milk route, and he serviced the hospital in Ogden.
Okay.
Well, Mom had graduated from the Washington State College, where, by the way, Mrs. Freer, Margaret Freer, who was a teacher here for years, was a dorm nanny or something. Alma Schultz, her sister, I think was also there. But once Mom graduated, she went back east, got her dietitian degree. So Mom was the dietitian at the hospital where Dad delivered milk. And
Rest is
needless to
history.
say, Mom married the milkman.
Well, at least she married him first.
Yeah. Well, they then moved up to Boise,
Okay.
and that's where Doug was born. And
Okay.
Dad was managing a creamery. Grandpa Fort, here in Mom's dad, had a heart attack, and so Mom and
Jeez.
Dad came up here to help with the orchard. So that's how Dad got here
Ended
from Idaho.
I thought I read somewhere where your dad was severely hurt in a fire.
Well, that was a helicopter accident.
Oh, okay.
What?
Yeah.
What? How? Where? What?
In the service or outside in the orchard?
The local farmers were the initial attack crew for the Forest Service. Dad was,
Jeez.
yeah. This
love
is
this.
stupid.
Your dad, your dad's
Dad,
an amazing guy.
Dad was a crew boss, and so they had these fire boxes around the community that were probably, 8 feet long, wooden boxes with rope handles. They had Pulaski, shovels, saws, stuff people would need for fighting fires.
Get out
So-
of here.
Yeah,
Like phone booths,
yeah.
but
So if there was a fire, the Forest Service would call Dad or one of the other supervisors. I think they were 2 or maybe 3 groups here. But anyway, the wives would then start a phone tree calling other members of the group. People would grab the fireboxes from wherever, and they'd take off in their Jeeps or pickups and go do initial attack on the fire.
Wow.
And
Enter the helicopter.
well, yeah. So there was a fire down in Wenatchee that they didn't get called to. That was big. And they had brought in a crew from either Arizona or somewhere down south. And they didn't speak English. And the crew went in and they went the wrong way. And so Dad and A.K. Platt and Haven Stanaway from up the Eniac, and there was someone else. But the Dad and A.K. Platt and I think Haven Stanaway were in the helicopter, and the fourth guy jumped in just as they were getting ready to take off, which the helicopters made for 3 people on a good day. And, you know, this is summer, and so they took off, and as they were flying over the fire, they lost lift because of the heat. And because the hotter it is, the farther apart air molecules are, but that's all aviation
Like, it's just thinner
stuff.
kind of
Yeah,
an
it's
air.
thinner. And so you lose your lift. And so they crashed, and Dad landed just a few feet away from the engine, and then Reuben Rose with the sheriff's office was up there somewhere nearby. He came and helped those guys all get out.
My word.
But the accident, Dad just got scalped, and he didn't have a lot of hair to start with, but he was picking rocks out of his head the rest of his life.
That's crazy.
You know, every now and then a rock
Somebody
would
else
just,
on our podcast had that same
you know, and it's a rock.
There was another, we had another, was it
Wasn't it
Otto?
Otto Ross, maybe was.
Do we have a crash?
That sounds exactly like the same story. Maybe had more than once. One of our
I don't
guests,
know.
Carl, was it Carl? I don't know.
No, it was
This is
early.
what's weird about small towns. There's when
Yeah.
you're doing this podcast, we're
Yeah,
hearing
there was
stories.
another story about a
Similar
Well,
situation.
A.K. Platt put a couple of helicopters in the ground.
Jeez.
You know, he
Well, this was the first one I heard about in Wenatchee.
this was up number 2 Canyon.
This is up number 2 Canyon.
Yeah,
When was this? What year?
early 60s.
Okay. And
And-
everybody survived though. The 4 guys.
Yeah, everybody survived.
That's wild. Wasn't
And-
that true in the other story?
I think so. I thought it sounded like exactly the same story to me. but
Crazy.
anyway.
Okay.
So
Which did not prevent you from then becoming a helicopter pilot.
No,
kind of slow
No,
learner.
why? No.
yeah, you know, knock knock, nobody's home. You know, and it's funny because Dad was very supportive, and you know, so yeah, it was fun.
All right, so let me get this straight. So you're Doug's the oldest of the boys,
Uh-huh.
and then who was
Dave.
born? Who was born here, and who was born?
Dave was the first one born here. Dave, Mary, Janet, Len, and I were all born here.
Okay.
And Janet, a side note, was born in October. So Mildred Lester, who is from Missouri, that I thought was a relative because they came to all our family dinners, was a nurse at the hospital. She'd brought Mom and Janet home because Dad was busy with harvest. And, you know, that's a story that's always popped out there. But,
Oh, of course.
you know, but
So when was
Anyway.
the first orchard that your family had farmed? What year do you think that was? If you had to guess.
Grandpa Fort, well, Mom was born in 21, and the orchard was already established.
So was this at a
So
time
10?
when the flume was being used?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fumi's being used until the mid-70s.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's from Goat Mountain on the North Shore all the way
Yeah.
past Antelope Lake all the way down. And
By
then,
my house.
It's amazing.
my yard.
Every time I go by that, I am amazed that those guys were able to do all of that with gravity, no computers,
I mean,
And-
the Romans did it.
Oh, yeah.
So
But-
I'm,
Well, but you killed people that did something wrong in Rome.
Yeah, and every time I would, that was one of our family trips. We'd
Walk in
jump
the
in
flume?
we had a 47 Willys that was a flatbed,
Nice.
one of only two. Hibbard's had another one, but we would jump in that and drive up to South Navarre, Summer Blossom, come around the loop and come down Johnson Creek, and that was, we'd stop and have a picnic and.
Well,
now what were the shocks like?
the community
on
actually, well, the community actually had a lot of guys employed to walk the flumes to get,
Oh, yeah.
get the dead
Yeah.
animals out, get the dirt out,
Yeah,
get the
make
leaves
sure
out.
they weren't leaking.
that? Yeah, Dave Lumen has amazing
Stories about
Yeah.
it.
stories
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
So the part that was confusing to me how they managed it was because it was all ditch irrigated,
Yeah,
and then the stories that I've been told that in the early 1900s, lakefront property was the least valuable
yep.
because that by then you might not have water. And so I'm just curious, I wonder how many fist fights there were between guys that were like, "Hey, you're using too much water, dude."
That was always. We would have to call to schedule our water for this block.
Like, because you're pulling a pin, the water's running down.
You're opening a gate, a valve, something to drain water, and and
It's crazy.
when I was
It is.
little, we used ditches.
Right,
There
right.
were two ditches down either side of the tree row, and it was most of a day job to run those ditches because you would divert the water to the ditch. And then you had to walk the ditch to make sure there weren't any gopher holes or
Right.
that a tractor or somebody had plugged the
dammed it up.
and so you had to walk every row up twice every row.
Yeah, so you can imagine
And-
this time of year, if the snowpack was low, which it wasn't really that back then. It would seem like there was a lot more snow, but growing up, but it had to be stressful. Like if you were at the end of the line and you're like, "Am I going to have enough water for my family's livelihood?"
I don't know that there was ever any real
Drama around
Yeah.
that.
One thing about the small town is that everybody also knows that you need to feed your family and your kids.
And there were consequences if you did something wrong.
Yeah. So
Like,
Yeah.
I'm
they didn't-
sure
they didn't call
I'm
the
sure
police.
Everybody before them knew, you know what? We got to make sure he's okay too.
And when
that
we grew
family's
up,
okay too.
and when you grew up, I grew up. We got 3 or 4 feet of snow. It was every year.
Come to my
the
house.
snow was taller than I was.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it's
boy.
So
funny.
it had to be 2 feet, at the time, because I remember
I
being a
love
little
you.
kid and I couldn't see over this,
You know what I'm
But,
thinking
yeah.
about when you're talking about this is that later on, kind of like it is now for most people, they have to go turn water on and turn it off and then go over here and turn it on and turn it off. And I imagine kids complain about that job.
Oh,
And it's one of those moments where the grandparents are like, back in my day,
well,
we
I
had
tell
to run
you,
water down a ditch.
For sure.
when all I really ever did with the ditches is maybe, run them. I was too little to know anything. It was just, hey, I
Go
knew
walk the line.
I knew the water stopped. That's about as smart as I was. Well, then I remember when we got the 20-foot irrigation pipes that we would do hand lines.
Yeah, oh yeah, I did that.
And so then it's a matter of putting in a pump to give you pressure to
Yeah.
do that. Or some places, your gravity, your orchard was low enough below the ditch, there was enough gravity that you didn't have to put a pump in. But we had pumps all over. And, we would have to, a lot of them, had the pump sitting here, and then they had an L and it went down and there was the pickup.
Like a
And-
catch. For,
Yeah, and the bottom there was a foot that would, if there was no water coming in, that foot was supposed to seal so you didn't have backflow, suction back. Well, those strainers for that pickup would get plugged up early in the spring, especially.
Oh, for sure.
And you'd have to either be able to get down there and clean them out, or unhook it and lift that out. And we didn't have cranes and all that stuff. It was all manual labor. Mm-hmm. And but we thought that was a hard life, having to change sprinklers after a few years, because it was morning and night.
Yeah.
And Dad would fix us breakfast so that we would get up in the morning, go do irrigation lines, come back, have breakfast, and then we'd go out and do the orchard work.
So Dad would fix you breakfast.
Yeah.
I feel like I see you making breakfast.
No.
No?
Rayanne won't let me. When she was working, I could. But now,
pass.
I used to make soups and roasts and different things. I don't. If she allows me to use
the job has been taken.
The smoker, then I can do that. I can do some of the cleanup. I can do dishes and.
Aren't you like leading the charge or helping out with the big pancake breakfast?
Yeah, but she isn't there.
Oh.
So I can be the boss. See? That's why she's not here today. You
didn't tell her about it. That's
well, I know I did.
Okay, so who's the baby?
What do you mean?
In your family. 7 kids.
We don't have a baby in our family.
Oh, so it's you.
We have the premier child that Mom and Dad learned was going to be the peak of
their parenting
that's it.
Journey.
And so here I am.
Yeah. Well, you've led an interesting life in this small town. So the high level police officer for 25 years, and not just in I looked into you. You won 3 times. You were you were honored as a Citizen of the Year, Kiwanis.
Yeah, but it's a small town. Yeah. You run out of people after
How
a
many
while.
other
You
sheriffs
also
were there?
Sheriff of the Year 3 times.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at, though. How many were there? 2?
Well, we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2
See,
million.
That's
2 million.
Yeah.
And I'm serious. Like,
There's a lot. I'm just saying, drug task force, helicopter pilot, apple farmer, father, grandfather, church leader, I'm sure. I mean, you've been a busy guy.
Well, and Len and I had a fumigation
Baseball
business.
coach, fumigation business.
Coaches through AAU and all sorts of stuff with, having 6 kids, you fell into the coaching role.
So you had 6 kids.
Yeah.
And you came from 7 kids. How many kids did Lynn?
8.
8 kids. How many kids did
I know
Lynn?
you went to school in Manson.
Yeah. I had 4 math teachers myself.
Yeah.
I didn't learn how to sell some stuff.
Your shoes are on, so it's hard to count.
Yeah. Get out in the orchard. All I knew, my dad said, he took me down to Casting Jammers and said he needs a job at the restaurant because he's too slow in the orchard. So I didn't do anything right.
okay, but I feel like you were the representation of the sheriff's department when I was growing up. I mean, I don't know how many of them there were, but
I think that's just because I randomly got the calls that you were involved with.
Oh, there we go.
like there were so many.
I know. They had to hire more deputies.
Damn California
because,
coolers.
Came to
because of the calls for service.
Well, let's talk about your highlights of those things. I want to hear some of your more memorable stories at whatever. You've done so many things, so
But
only you can tell us when I'm asking you, like, what pops out as a cop. What are the memories that you have? Good or bad? Not.
Things have changed. What you wish was old, like back again.
Well, when I started, I was at the Chelan PD, and there are some old farts in there sitting around.
Well, Marion was one of our guests.
Yeah, Marion, speaking of old farts. And, see, his wife was my sister's best friend growing up here.
Oh, really?
Oh, cool.
And so I knew Marion and Diane when I was a kid.
They're
Cool.
great people.
But anyway, their comments when, they were talking about the rookie and, I could never start this job today with all the changes they have made. And they're just lamenting the fact that all the changes that have happened in their careers.
Sure.
And I'm just kind of laughing and, well, that's true.
You'd say that too?
I don't know that I could be a cop today because everybody knows your job better than you do. And
They got Facebook now. So
yeah.
they just look
Every-
chat,
body
chat
cam,
GPT, man.
Body cams.
I mean,
body cams are good.
it's bad enough when, you go to court and the defense attorney, questions what you're doing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, nowadays it's everything is
Yeah.
adjudicated before trial.
Right.
And, the police officers seem to be wrong no matter what they do.
Well, they sure went through a rough time of it a few years ago.
Yeah. And it's getting better.
It's getting better. My son-in-law is in the police academy right now. He got hired on by Kitsap County.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was a stay-at-home dad for
Oof, that's
6
rough.
years.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want
So
it.
he's feeling the good side of the pendulum kind of coming back
Well, yeah.
because they're giving
And-
him some raises, and they're
Well, yeah. When we started, my first paycheck here was I think $600 for a month.
it's funny you say that because I found cleaning out a garage this last weekend. Our class, what do you call it? The book at the end of the year.
Annual,
yeah. Sorry, getting old. The 1987 annual, right? And
Those
it's-
books.
Yeah, those books.
That book, with pictures.
The yearbook?
But here's the thing about money. It had this like business cards for sponsors,
Oh, yeah.
and they were $30.
Uh-huh.
Got your business card in the annual.
Yeah.
I mean, does it?
That was pretty good money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like,
That's like $150.
I mean, that's
now.
less than. I mean, that's less than $100 a person in your family.
the minimum wage was like $3 when I was in high school, so it
And
makes sense.
and that's where Rayanne, made it work.
Yeah, so 6 kids, and
She did daycare in the home.
yeah,
With, I don't know, 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids. But a lot of her clients were teachers. And, they encouraged her to go back to school and get a teaching degree. And so when Whitney was probably, I don't know, 4.
She's your peak child.
Whitney's our peak child. She's the, yeah. She's not the golden boy. Casey is the golden boy. He's our number 2. He is the child that if you ask, what time it is, he's standing there with the clock. If somebody said the garbage is getting full, he's hauling it out. And so he was especially his mother's golden boy. Mm-hmm. And the other children let him know that. And, but anyway, when Whitney was not quite entered school, she started home study through BYU.
Oh, cool.
And that was the time they would mail the assignment. She would do it.
Oh, boy.
Put it in
Mail
the
it
mail
back.
and mail it back. But she had to spend so many hours, class hours, on campus in Utah.
Oh, what?
And but she grew up in Orem, which is right next to Provo, where she had to go. So she would go spend summers with her folks.
Now who's cooking?
Yeah. And the biggest problem with that is when Aaron was, I don't know, 10, 11, he stayed home with me that summer. And apparently my influence isn't what his mother desired. But anyway.
So she came home to, I got to retrain everybody in this house.
She wanted a forest behind her house. So we lived there at Totem Pole and Ford down below the school. Mm-hmm. And we had, 4 acres, and we built a house there, and there was some area behind the house. And so we had planted various pine trees and, just all sorts of trees.
She wanted a woodsy.
Birch and, yeah. Well, these little pine trees are about this tall, and
Oh boy.
she's coming home, and the grass is about this tall, and so called Len's son, Jeffrey, who's a physical therapist at the hospital now,
Yeah.
who's, like a year or so older than Aaron. We grabbed 2 weed whips, and I put them to work.
Sure did.
Well, when I came home, it looked great for a golf course.
Yeah. Busted.
The trees lived.
They did?
Yeah, some of them were kind of ugly, but they lived.
You know what I loved about you living in that house? Your patrol car was parked where you could see it. So we all knew if you were on or off duty.
Uh-huh.
And they also knew what house not to mess with.
Yeah.
That's why he did that.
It's like, oh, good. Woo! Dale's at home. Or
Well,
Dale's
there's
not.
really nowhere else to park. But, speaking of living there, I'd come out of Totem Pole I was bringing a truckload of fruit to the warehouse, and I came out of Totem Pole and went up Fabian. And right there at
Still have no idea
Fabian
what he's
and
talking
Washington, where Danny Mogan lives,
Okay.
there's a stop sign. Well, when your truck's loaded, you don't want to be too aggressive with the stop. And so
You want a California stop?
Yes, a weak California stop. And we had a family that lived down on Washington Street. And they had this high school kid that was driving. And
I don't like where this is going.
And as I'm trying to get through this stop sign, and all of a sudden, this car comes flying around the corner. I swear it was on 2 wheels. And it smoked it around the corner in front of me. And, it was just, I just don't know. I'm still traumatized from that event.
Those crazy high school kids, man.
Yeah, that's so strange. I wonder who that was.
I don't know. But,
Yeah.
The McClellans, Donnie McClellan lived down the road.
That is weird. That's very strange.
And, I don't know
you
what...
live with your dad?
Some people think that I drove fast when I was younger.
Listen, okay. He had to show up when I totaled my vehicle, so you're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah, no blood, no foul.
Did you hide and park your car anywhere?
There's been times.
Yeah.
Was that hide from him?
These are the
know
reason
what?
I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, you haven't lived until a farmer has forklifted your vehicle behind apple bins.
I just
okay?
love that I've heard this story before.
That's a new story. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Evidently, I was going too fast.
This
No
is
Oh.
way.
I heard this story.
I didn't see it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And this is
I've
the
heard
first-
there's other stories I remember.
This is
Uh-huh. But I can't go through that intersection without feeling trauma even
Yeah.
today.
There's just like a PTSD
It
marker.
is.
your heart just starts like
Yeah.
I was probably lucky there was no phones that had cameras back then. Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, for
Well, it was
sure.
too fast for that.
And my dad got the call probably by the time I got home.
Yeah.
And we'd be like,
Yeah, having grown up here, having been driving, on the roads since maybe a little before there was documentation for it, and kids need to be kids. And
there is something I'm curious
know?
about that statement because now with the no pun intended the helicopter parenting and the ideology shifting in so many different ways from so many different angles. Basically, I remember with my 2, I said, look, I'm kind of your trainer. I'm not really your friend. Like I'm here to kind of help guide you so you don't, do this and that. And have you seen with 6 kids, have you seen the changes? And when you were, like, what year did you stop being a police officer? What?
2008.
So, yeah, and that was kind of like about the time things started to like really.
Yeah.
What do you know what I'm talking about? Like just the mindset of people in general and kids especially.
Well,
like you said, let them grow up, let them be kids. Well, I think sometimes they don't do that enough. Like they're protecting them too much.
He's got a lot of grandkids
I
to
love
witness.
that we live in a place where our house is by an orchard, that our grandkids can be feral.
Yeah, right. That's a
Yeah.
great word.
And
Love it.
yeah,
I love it.
you know, Marissa and Javier live on the same orchard, but they're not maybe a quarter mile away. It's not unusual to have their 2-year-old and 5-year-old show up at our door alone. You know, and they might be barefoot. You know, they may only have underwear on or whatever.
Yeah,
but
I love it.
it's,
I love
you
it.
know,
I love that.
and you know, the kids ride 4-wheelers. They, you know, they live kind of the life that is nice. It's outside. It's
Yeah.
taking safe risks.
That's
And
the
I
word.
think
Safety.
that's important
I
for
think
kids.
that creates like a sense of a safe, yet within boundaries kind of environment that builds confidence and independence, but within.
The difference is Rand's boundaries are much different than mine, and so you know,
It's a good balance.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I think it's capacity, right? Like if you're never pressing, we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
If you're growing up and you're crashing your 4-wheeler, you got to figure out how to get it back up. If you blow a tire and you're in the middle of an orchard somewhere, you got to figure out a way to.
Yeah,
Like you just got to solve problems.
Yeah.
And that's pressing capacity. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes now when you see this ideology that everything is life or death when it's really not. It's
Well-
that, but it's that also the. To be fair to those people, not just kids, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you.
yeah,
Correct.
So
But
it's
also,
up here, right?
I tend to put a little bit of emphasis on the fact that it's whatever your nervous system, your daily load, your bandwidth, whatever you can handle. So I gauge things for myself, and this is why I give people a lot of grace. I will make choices for my son based on what I'm able to handle.
yeah,
So, you know, when I've got 30 things on my day's schedule and a lot of stress, extra stress going on, and maybe a lack of sleep, I'm going to have more limits. Because if something happens, I'm not going to be able to handle it very well. But on a day where I have low stress and not a lot on the calendar, I have a lot more room for freedom. Because if there's a catastrophe, no problem.
yeah,
I got it. You know? So sometimes it's just your own personal
There's no
bandwidth.
blueprints.
yeah.
There's no
you're right.
blueprints, you know.
And you know, you just hope they survive.
You hope they survive. I
But
like
you
that.
know, you asked about some things with the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
You know, there are funny stories. There
Mm-hmm.
are not so funny stories.
bet.
You know, they're living here, knowing most of your clients on various levels. You know, they're families that I've arrested 3 generations. They're, you know, it's hard when people you know are victims that it's not their fault. You know, and, you know, I tried to do the least amount of enforcement that was required to fix the situation.
That's what I was going to say. You know, do you feel like you took personal liberties when you could to be hopeful and kind and give grace, you know, when it was allowed, but still do your job?
Yeah. And, you know, that's easier when you know people. When they're Turons that are here,
Yeah.
it's easier to not have that patience.
Empathy.
Because you don't know them. You don't know their background. You're never going to see them again.
Right, right.
If I arrest somebody, I'm going to see them at a ball game, at the store, somewhere. And so I know people aren't going to agree with it, but I tried to be as fair as I could. And still do what I had to do.
Right.
Well, so I think Marion said the same thing. You know, how many kids he took home.
Yeah.
You know, instead of arresting them, he would just like, hey, you know, this is what's
Come
going
on.
down. Talk to the parents. You know,
Yeah.
Sometimes parents handle it worse than the cop.
Well, and they used to.
Yeah.
And, you know, but, so, yeah, there were challenges. But, you know, probably the two, you know, having picked up a lot of people off the side of the road, or parts of people off the side of the road,
brother.
or
Yeah.
different situations, you know, there are all these graphic events.
yeah.
But I think the two most long-lasting were recovering Timmy McCabe and Jason Batchelor,
That was a tough day.
and then,
That's brutal.
yeah,
That's brutal.
knowing both their families,
Yeah.
and then going to tell Saul Gallegos' wife that he had been killed.
Yeah. There's a sheriff as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Not fun parts of
Yeah.
your job.
But the blessing is we still have that strong connection today. And, you know, especially with the Gallegos family, my family has just so greatly been blessed by being incorporated into theirs,
That's wonderful.
you know, and seeing those four boys of theirs grow up to be such good young men.
Yeah.
And, you know, for Chayo to be so strong. She didn't speak English.
Oh my gosh.
And you know, now she helps teach English.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive. That's not easy to
But
do.
no. But you know, those are probably the two biggest impacts
Yeah, I'll bet.
of my policing career.
Did you have those fears ever? Did you have to reconcile those kind of fears for yourself and your family?
My mindset was, you know, this may be my last shift.
Never know.
Yeah.
Yowza.
I had a good friend. I don't know if you remember. He was a state patrolman that got shot when he was 27 years old, and in the Tri-Cities.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
got shot in the head.
Sanders.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we played college basketball together at Wenatchee Valley,
Yeah.
and he just pulled the guy over.
Yeah.
This punk kid, you know, punk
Yeah.
wannabe drug dealer, you know. Bam,
And
you're dead.
I think as the Ray Ann in this story, in this era of your life, you got 6 kids. I mean, that's like just got to be a constant in her mind
Yeah.
thing that she has to suppress almost.
Yeah. You know, and I'm sure it's harder for her. For me, I was out playing fun and games, driving fast and eating donuts.
Yeah, chasing kids in cars.
That's
Totally.
it. You know, I mean, I was living the life. She was the one that would have faced the consequences.
Yeah.
So how'd you get so lucky? Marry a girl like that?
He was the peak
Oh, I see.
child.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
Well, you
what
know,
it was.
we were both going to Rick's College in Idaho. and I was working as a student officer there, and she was a student dispatcher, and she was, it's pretty mellow. So when she'd work a night shift, she'd lay out 3 chairs and bring a blanket and a pillow, that kind of a shift. But anyway, that's how I got to know her. And President's Day, I think it was, or something, I was coming home and asked if she wanted to, come up to Manson. And
Wait, you'd never been on a date?
Yeah, we'd been on a few dates. We'd been dating about a month.
Okay. I'm like, hey, out of the blue, want to come home?
Hey,
Okay, all right.
living life loose and free.
When you know, you know,
All
man.
right. Okay.
And, told Mom and Dad I was bringing Ray home. And, it's about a 12-hour drive then, and we show up about 11 or 12 at night, and Dad's, comes out in his leopard skin bathrobe to Rayanne.
Get out of here.
And so, yeah. That was her introduction to Dad, and Dad's introduction to Ray.
That's funny. I remember seeing your dad at every game.
Yeah.
Every game.
Yeah.
Dad and Mom.
They didn't miss a game of mine.
Yeah, or mine, I don't think.
And
They were always there.
Yeah. Dad, Mom would stay home with kids, but Dad, travel, home, didn't matter.
And one of the fun things about looking back at some of the VHS tapes my dad did of us is that all the people in the stands.
Oh,
The usual suspects.
Yeah, I mean, just like some of a lot of people are passed away now, but.
and hopefully those weren't audio also.
Oh, yeah, they're
or
audio.
else,
There's some audio.
There's
There-
so many people screaming though of how great the game was.
Yeah, that's what it
Figure
was.
anything out, so we're all good.
Nobody questioned anything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different era,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun. We actually put a tape of the Tacoma Dome, and we had a little get-together with Todd and Frank, and just Frank and our birthdays are
brother.
pretty close together.
Uh-huh.
So that was the funnest part of the tape is when my dad spanned through the crowd. You see all
You're
the,
like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
all those faces, much younger faces.
Oh, much. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
And
those
that's
are
the
fun.
fun thing about the generational rivalries back in the day. We talk a lot about that in sports when the small towns,
Yeah.
the grandparents, the
And,
parents.
and parents knew each other.
Yeah.
And like the Ingram boys are related to the Swinkendorfs in Eniat. And so
I'm sorry, the who's-y what's-its?
The Sweekendorf.
Kelly Ingram, Doug Ingram,
Yeah.
Got them.
Dave?
The other name?
the Swinkendorfs. Yeah.
Wow. I bet
And they were big boys.
I bet they have to spell that
And-
name out.
We'd go down and play them, and it was kind of it was a rivalry.
Yeah.
But it was, it wasn't a mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
guns and knives. It was,
Yeah.
it
The good,
was-
healthy kind.
Yeah. Slap each other and, But anyway, it was great.
So, Dale, when you got done with being a sheriff in 2008, is that when you decided
Well,
to...
got done as a...
Well, you just got done. When
Yeah.
you moved on. And is that when you decided to do the helicopter or the fumigation?
Well, no, we started the fumigation in the late 80s.
Oh, a long time ago.
Yeah, the EPA was outlawing methyl bromide
Right.
as a soil scalant to fumigate where trees were planted.
And Talon, right?
Well, Telone is what we used. Telone was used in potatoes for years, and it so happened my brother Dave worked for Dow Chemical as a Telone rep in potatoes in Montana. And then he had moved to Yakima by then. But when they were outlawing methyl bromide in cans, we would get them in 1 pound cans. The 2 ways to use them is you dig a hole with your tree auger and you freeze the cans and keep them in a cooler. You take them and you throw them in the bottom of the hole and you shoot it with a 22 and then
Get outta
and then
here.
you put the dirt back on.
Come on.
This is farming, And
Got to kill those nematodes.
that's right. And so you
Get
So you'd cover the dirt up, and that would as the can thawed out, it would gas off because at 40 degrees, methyl bromide is a liquid. And above 40 degrees, it'll turn to a gas. And as a gas, it'll come out of the can and permeate the soil. Well, the big boys in potatoes and stuff use 15-foot wide applicators that shank it into the ground as a gas. And, those are, the big 400 horsepower tractors and all this stuff. It's not feasible for the farmer. And so, the other way to do the methyl bromide by cans is you have a little T-handle applicator with a tube, and you have this receptacle, you put the can in it, and then you clamp it, and when you clamp it, there's a little rod that pokes the side of the can, and then the gas runs down that probe into the dirt. So you can do it without digging the hole.
And shooting it. But that doesn't sound quite as fun.
But those cans you kept in a cooler because you had to keep warm. And so you'd have warm water or whatever in them. Well, so they're eliminating the methyl bromide. And so Dave talks to Dow Chemical and says, hey, why don't we do some test plots with telone to see if it'll work in the apples? Because about 30 years ago, before that, they had done some tests back in Michigan on it, and it worked, but we just had no way to apply it. And it's a special use pesticide, and we used telone 2, which is telone and chlorpicrin, which chlorpicrin is a tear gas. And
amazing.
So we would this R&D guy came up from California. He had a 13-gallon tank, a platform with a pump on it, and an applicator with 2 shanks that go into the ground with tubes down the back.
Oh my goodness.
And so the telone is a liquid. So it would be pumped by this pump to a certain pressure, go down these chutes, these tubes, and at the bottom, they'd just dribble out. So you'd dribble 2 lines of telone. Well, these shanks are like 15 inches apart. Well, we needed about a 3-foot wide.
Because you're wanting to go down the row.
Yeah. And we want to plant a tree in the middle of this. Mm-hmm. So we want to have enough ground treated on both sides that the roots can, grow out. And so we used an old, it wasn't old then, but it was our 2-wheel drive orchard tractor, because we didn't have 4-wheel drive orchard tractors. And so we hook it up to it, and we go down below the house, and there's a hill, and then it flattens out. Well, we had to make 2 passes.
Because when you get on the hill,
to get our width.
Oh.
So we would have to drive. We could only go downhill because we didn't have enough power to come up the hill. So we'd go down, lift the shanks, come around, go down a second time beside it.
Oh.
And we did, I think it was like 10 rows. And at that time, our tree rows were 20 feet apart. Mm-hmm. And so what we did was we made new rows that were, now I can't remember. Okay, 20 feet. We went 6 feet on either side of an existing row. And then we would take the old row out once these little trees started growing. And so, and the whole time Dad is standing there saying, boy, I hope you don't kill my trees. I hope you don't kill my trees.
Well, yeah.
Well, after a couple of years, Dad says, why didn't you do more? Because it worked. Well, while we're doing this, a neighbor, Dick Bailey, drives by, who happens to own the Davis track at that time. And he says, what are you doing? And we said, well, and he goes, well, I've got 10 acres. I'll pay you to do it. Mm-hmm. And
then the business is born.
And that's how it was born.
Yeah.
It took us 2 days to do 10 acres. We would siphon the telone out of 30-gallon barrels into this 13-gallon tank, and make 2 passes, and we had to deadhead, and it took us 2 days.
Brother,
That's
okay.
probably the job we made the most money on in our career.
Well, that was a big time when the rootstocks evolved and
Yep.
the density changed
Yep.
from like
And-
original Johnny Appleseed to 3,500 trees an acre. Like,
Yep.
It was crazy.
And so from there, a lot with Dave's help, we bought a 4-wheel drive tractor. We designed our own 3-shank applicator. And these applicators, they had 2 bolts at the top of the shank. And so if you hit a rock or something, the front bolt was soft and it would shear. And so the shank would flip instead of ripping it off of the head.
Yeah.
Well, so we had 2 boxes of 1/2 inch by 4 inch.
So you're just popping new
So
shanks on there.
every time. Well, there were some orchards that one of us would literally walk behind the tractor, putting these back in.
Because it was so rocky and
Yeah. Well,
hilly.
then we're out in the Columbia Basin, and we see these applicators out there that are 14 feet wide with these spring-loaded ones.
So,
So-
spring-loaded sounds
So we
fancy.
went to an auction and bought one of these 14-foot wide ones, stole the shanks off them, cut the applicator down to where we
To
could
get to
put
your
3
whip.
shanks. But it was still, because it went 14 feet, it was huge steel. And so we had to put our tank out in front of the tractor to give us any front weight, or else if we hit anything, it would just lift up because it was so back heavy.
Yeah.
Well, that brought us to buying a field tractor with a cab, air conditioner, a stereo, 4-wheel drive.
Modernizing
it was sweet.
farming.
Life was
Yeah.
good.
And then we bought a second one that was bigger yet.
So how many years total did you do the fumigation?
We did that about 22 years.
Really?
And
Really?
then there again, regulations.
Yeah.
I mean, when we started, we could pull up to the field, fill out the paperwork, knock it out, and be gone.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got to go to the field a week early. You've got to measure it. You've got to notify people that live, within certain areas.
Oh.
And, then you can apply it. It's just, but the guy that bought our company has somebody that does nothing but the paperwork.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Okay. So
And
that kind of takes the fun out of it.
It does. And when Len and I did it, I had to do all the work, and Len would just sit back. And,
Oh.
Every now and then he might drive a tractor, or
I love it.
Oh, boy.
You
here
know,
comes
bring
the-
me lunch.
Now we got to get
But-
Lynn on now.
Now here
'cause-
comes
But-
the Len backlash as soon as
But
this
you
airs.
know, I was the one doing.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Youngest, but did all the work.
yeah.
Makes sense.
It does.
I get it.
And but we had a guy that was a park ranger that was working for us, and it's a seasonal job. It's
Yeah.
After harvest, before the ground gets too cold, and then in the spring, once the ground warms up until
Well,
1st of May.
To stay farming in the last 30 decades, you've got to be the MacGyver of entrepreneurship.
Oh yeah, yeah, and
For sure.
and so that was really, the kids would complain about the smell of my shoes when I'd come home and stuff, and I said, that's the smell of.
Food on the table.
College.
That's right. That's the smell of. That's the smell of.
That's the smell of
That's
everything.
the smell of your new shoes.
So
Yes.
so we got a hard stop with you because you have to get somewhere in 14 minutes. So I want to also give us the rundown of the helicopter business real quick.
Yeah, because I loved your helicopter business.
Good.
I had a really good time with that.
I'm glad. Well, we grew up near where A.K. Platt would take off in his biplanes to do the spraying. And, the planes were loaded, so he'd take off and turn and fly right over us. Just
So that's kind of like across from the
buzzing.
casino above the.
where
above,
Pittman's Orchard
above
is.
that, yeah.
Yeah, where.
That silver shop is.
Yep. That was
Oh.
his shop.
The entrance to Chelan Ridge.
Yeah. And that was all Pittman's Orchard there on the other side of the road from the casino.
Pear Orchard.
Was all, well, what used to be alfalfa.
Okay.
Well, he had a gravel strip right there by the highway.
Right.
I mean, it was right by the highway. And he would take off and turn and just fly right over us. He'd wave at us, and it was just fun. And then once I got married, my financial advisor said I wasn't going to do plane lessons.
Rayanne.
Yeah. And she didn't like flying because she knows some people that had been in accidents. And,
Yes, so did you.
And so anyway, we're at a party with Chris Anderson and Dave Zuloaga and I don't know who else, and talking about it. And Jim Scribner's a guy I went to school with. He's a flight instructor in Wenatchee. We conned his boss into bringing the plane to Chelan a couple days of the week if we had 3 lessons. So in the summer, 4 or 5 of us got our licenses. We then formed a club, bought an airplane, and that was great. Mm-hmm. And then Bill Worth, who's an aviation enthusiast, told me that what I needed to do is get my helicopter license because they were just starting to dry cherries with helicopters.
Oh.
And so stupid me did, and I used fumigation money so I didn't have to go through my normal
channels.
Yeah, so I kind of went around it and got my license, and then I'm kind of, well, now what do I do? Because I spent all this money on a license and
gotta use it.
Nobody will hire me because I'm low time. Gee. Mm-hmm. And look, I can do a contract and make all the payments and insurance just by standby drying cherries.
I mean, it's convincing me.
Yeah. Well,
it's convincing me.
There are a lot more eye rolls and a lot more stop signs.
Yeah.
But anyway, see, that's where Ran is so great. She doesn't feel the vision, but she'll let me do it. Mm-hmm. So, we did. And it was great because my whole vision of forming the company was having someone else pay for my joy to fly. Mm-hmm. And it did.
I love that.
It was great.
Right. A lucrative hobby.
Yeah.
So how many trips to Sahican in that helicopter have you
Boy,
made?
I couldn't even tell you.
I was one.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you. Did we go up over Lucerne and then cut through the...
You showed us
by Castle Peak?
Holden, because that was when Rio Tinto
okay.
was doing all of that. And then we landed at Courtney's.
At the ranch.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah.
And we brought home an obscene amount of bakery goods.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoever bought that company, I had my partners had them tour some of our real estate projects this last year. I mean, for that purpose. So it's become like you started it with this vision. You had faith, not fear, right? And your wife said, green light. I have faith, not fear. I'm going to let you do you. And then it transported into drying cherries, tourism, site tours,
Community, because you did fun things.
Santa
too.
Claus.
Yeah, I don't know about the Santa Claus thing.
With the falling cow.
Love it.
Those are some of the best memories.
I'll bet.
Being able to bring Santa in.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's great.
Dropping candy for the trunk or treat. The cows,
So fun. Big time memories in a small town. Big time.
Mm-hmm.
Big time that you were able to facilitate.
The problem is, once the internet was busy, the insurance tends to see the fun you're having. And they call and say, "Now, what is this?" Mm-hmm. And
the kibosh.
If anybody's self-employed in anything now, they know that insurance companies are running the world.
Yep.
I mean,
but also what's
sad.
happening that, impacts a lot of people. It's impacted me. AI goes out and, finds all the things that no one ever knew about before.
Yeah.
Like, we got hit with a cease and desist from the Space Needle to remove the image of the Space Needle likeness in our logo.
Jeez.
Oh,
Yeah, well, there you go. That's causing lots of problems.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
The world's coming to an end on
you
that
know.
one.
yep. Yep.
Could we just stop that now?
You know,
Yeah.
so it's just, come on.
I remember
So,
my
yeah.
dad's called it when I told him I was young, but we were farming together, and I said, you know, there's a spray drift rule, Dad. We gotta have somebody with a flagger, and he's looking at me going, what? And that's when he knew that the government's going to make me a
Yeah.
criminal.
Yep. And they take the fun out of farming.
Yeah.
And it's
I agree. You take
it's
the fun
not
out of everything.
you know, I am a fan of freedom. I am a fan of being the wild card.
Consequences.
If I do something and I hurt or kill myself that I should have known better, that's a gene pool deal. I mean, how many times do I have to drink Clorox to realize maybe I
Probably
shouldn't do that?
drink Clorox.
My dad was a fan
You
of
know.
that. My dad has a dry sense of humor too, right? He was a stoic man, but he said, this whole not letting kids drive in the back of a truck to Wenatchee, it's going to hurt the gene pool. His whole thing was, if you stand up and you're going 60 miles an hour, that kid shouldn't breed.
That's right.
I
And-
mean, Darwinism is the.
Sorry
is
if
the
anybody had a
thing,
kid fall out of a
right?
truck.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't mean it in a bad way, but there is
Right.
some truth to that. When you grow up with consequences,
Now we're getting canceled.
we're getting
Yeah.
We're getting
Yeah.
It was a
canceled.
joke. Allegedly, my dad said that. Anyway, you don't have any minutes. We have 5 minutes, Dale.
I know. So
Been a pleasure, though. My God.
it had.
So
Oh,
fun.
for sure. Is there like any last kind of highlight or, yeah,
Something you want to share?
of your life here? Like, honestly, you've touched so many people in such a good way, powerful way. Your family's amazing. Any last, what are you nostalgic for? What do you hope for? I don't know.
I just hope that my grandkids can grow up in an environment that they are outside more than they're inside.
Yeah, amen to that.
That what drives me nuts as the changes that have occurred, I know they happen everywhere,
Yeah.
is that the mentality of changing what we do to fit somewhere else. We are unique. And
Yes, we are.
the more taxes and regulations and things that I'm told I cannot do make me look for options.
Yeah, less bureaucracy.
Yeah,
More dirt bikes, less video games.
that's right. I got a grandkid that, I took down to Warden and we bought a dirt bike
Perfect.
instead of going to school that day.
Heck yeah.
That's one of the
He-
best memories.
Yeah,
You know,
Love it.
it was an off-road bike, didn't have an ignition, he put an ignition on it, he went through the YouTube and all these things
Yeah.
and was able to put an ignition in it. And to me, those are things that I want to see able to happen and a place for him to ride it.
Yeah, there you go.
I
You know?
There you
These are good
And
life
so,
skills.
I don't see farming being sustainable. I mean, we are, we're losing, we're losing that aspect.
Yeah.
It was a special time.
It was a
Special
great
time.
life.
It was a great life.
It was hard. We did a lot of things, but You know, it was great.
Yeah, well, you should be proud because you've touched a lot of lives, and your family loves you. All the people that you've touched in this community. It's an amazing life you've led already, and you're a pretty young guy still. So, who knows what's next for you?
Yeah, who knows?
You're like the serial entrepreneur. I can appreciate that.
Well, you know, and talking about starting new things, the first thing that comes to mind
Now what?
is, what's the government going to do to stop us?
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Oh, I don't
know?
know.
I mean,
Sometimes you got to ask for forgiveness.
that's right.
This is true in all.
My dad-
It is.
In all
But you
areas
know,
of our
I certainly am blessed, having been raised here, lived here, raised kids here, raising grandkids here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful life.
You know.
I say as an outsider looking in, it's a beautiful life.
It is.
Well, I hope people got to know you a little better today instead of just of you, because that's the goal of this podcast.
Well,
I hope your grandkids and great grandkids and we won't show your wife anything that we'll edit out all the stuff that you said.
No.
Well, thanks.
She's gonna
be like, "What did he say?"
She's gonna love it.
Just
She's
kidding,
gonna
man.
love
He
it.
didn't say anything.
she'll know, because you know, when we go someplace and there are people there that have known me through whatever work or whatever, when they see her, their first comment, without an
Unequivocally.
exception, is something to the effect of, "Your place in heaven is secured,"
That's great.
because having to deal with him.
Oh,
That's funny.
I think she's pretty lucky too.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Well,
I think she's pretty lucky too.
Well, I'm lucky to call you my friend, and thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you.
Small Towns Unscripted.
See you at the pancake breakfast.
Yes, I'll be there, but I'm not doing it this year
Oh,
because we've got too many things going on out of the area, and I'm just not going to be here enough to
Should be
do
there
it
to eat.
this year. But,
be there to eat
but I'm
pancakes.
definitely going to eat, and I'll probably stop in and see how I can help that morning.
of course I will.
All right,
Okay.
guys. Signing off one more time.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dale.
so much.
Bye-bye.